It's an extremely cold take to say that Pokémon should release their older games to be more accessible. Like, everybody knows this. It's a #1 fan request whenever there's a poll put out, but it's getting so cartoonishly ridiculous that I think it might just mean something big is coming. I know that just sounds like copium, but hear me out for like 9 or 10 minutes or whatever. In case you don't know how bad it is, which, like, unless this video blows up, you're actively seeking out Pokémon on a Nintendo-based channel that's a side content to my main horror theories, so I feel like you really like Pokémon if you're watching this video, but somehow, if you just came across this and you don't know, there are currently 9 generations of mainline Pokémon games, of which Nintendo only actively sells new copies, digital or physical, of the last 2. You cannot buy any other mainline Pokémon game new. And like, sure, a lot of other companies only make new copies for so long. I don't expect Activision to be pumping out Modern Warfare 2 copies anytime soon, but there are some compounding factors here. 1, pretty much every company in existence still sells digital copies of their older games on current consoles for perpetuity for the most part, and 2, used copies of Modern Warfare 3 don't go for these prices. Pokémon games are wildly inaccessible, especially if you're starting now. God forbid you wanted to play something like Pokémon Black 2 or White 2. You might as well take out a mortgage before you try. Many fans have to resort to piracy in order to access the majority of the Pokémon catalog. I know that some people have their opinions on piracy. First of all, I've always thought that if it's a major corporation, pirate away. Second, if buying isn't owning, then pirating isn't stealing. But for a more professional opinion on the matter from somebody in the industry, Gabe Newell, owner of Steam, said this 8 years ago. "We think there is a fundamental misconception about piracy. Piracy is almost always a service problem, and not a pricing problem. If a pirate offers a product anywhere in the world, 24/7, purchasable from the convenience of your personal computer, and the legal provider says the product is region locked, will come out to your country 3 months after the US release, and can only be purchased at a brick-and-mortar store, then the pirate service is more valuable." This couldn't be more true. The answer to beating piracy has never been cheaper products, it's always been more easily accessible content. It's like crime. You don't stop crime by over-policing. You stop crime by providing people their basic necessities so they don't have to resort to crime. If Game Freak wants to stop piracy, they need to provide their games easily and readily to the public. But they seem unwilling to thus far, which is ridiculous, because there are several avenues that they could do right now, including avenues they've done in the past. Before now, you could pretty much play any Pokémon game through the Virtual Console. For those of you who don't know, the eShop offered this service for the 3DS, Wii, and Wii U. It was essentially an emulated version of various previous Nintendo consoles that you could purchase games for relatively cheap. These prices are a little egregious for how old these games are, but at least it's a purchasable method that you can do. Problem is though, the Wii eShop has been closed for some time, and last year, the 3DS and Wii U eShops closed their doors. The Virtual Consoles are no longer available. If you bought them when the time came, that's one thing, you can still access it. But if you didn't buy it then, and you want to buy it now, you're shit out of luck. This is honestly where the majority of piracy comes from for Nintendo games in my opinion. It's almost a meme how easy it is to crack a 3DS. I did myself earlier this year, and it took like 2 Google searches and an afternoon. But now I've got every single Pokémon game ever released before the 3DS on my 3DS. And I would have loved to pay for it. I want Platinum on my Switch so bad, like the original release of Platinum. I'd pay upwards of $40, $50 for it. I've made no secret that if they just re-released, not remade, just re-released ports of games on the Switch, I would buy it in an instant. Wind Waker HD for the Wii U? I'd pay $70 to have that on my Switch today. But none of these are offered. And sure, they do offer remakes of older games, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl being the most recent examples. And say what you want about the quality of that remake, it's still a remake for the modern console, which is nice, but that still doesn't solve your issue, because most fans just want the original version. And even if you make a really damn good remake, like say Heart Gold and Soul Silver, give it a generation or two and that game will similarly be inaccessible. It's worth noting that Heart Gold and Soul Silver are some of the most expensive Pokémon games on the secondary market, and those are remakes of Gen 2. But these are all ways they've done it in the past. There are more and new ways for them to distribute their older games, and they're just not utilizing them for no reason. And there's even things that you can do right now, like subscribing to the channel, because it really helps grow this new passion project of mine. For one, sure, the 3DS and Wii U eShop is closed, but the Nintendo Switch has an eShop, and that eShop is on the highest selling Nintendo console if you don't count the DS, which is technically a handheld, so console still works, although the Switch is kind of a handheld, so the line is murky. Anyways, they have an eShop here that they could just re-release those Virtual Console ports too, but they've seemingly refused to. Not to mention that we have NSO, the Nintendo Switch Online service, which has its very own catalog of playable games for free for older generations, the Game Boy Advance being one of their best libraries. series. That could host the first 3 generations of Pokemon. That means 8 mainline games could be available for free to every NSO member right now if Pokemon Company felt like it, but it's not, because they don't. And Pokemon Company just put out a huge list of non-mainline games onto the Nintendo Switch Online service, like Colosseum and others, so they know it's there. This almost felt like a slap in the face. Like, really, as of 4 days ago, Nintendo put out a video titled Nintendo Switch Online Official Pokemon Trailer. Why would you do that if not just to upset people, when the trailer just reveals things like Pokemon Puzzle League? I'm not saying that you have to release every single game for free, but like, you know what you're doing if you put out a video that says Nintendo Switch Online Official Pokemon Trailer and none of the mainline games are shown or displayed to be coming to Nintendo Switch Online. Like, at this point, you're doing it on purpose. So the question that many fans are asking is why? Well, look at the timing. We are 2 years away from Pokemon Company's 30th anniversary. Obviously, they're planning a big celebration. When I talked about Generation 10 of Pokemon, a lot of you pointed out that 2026 seems like the most likely year, if not just for the fact that it's the 30th anniversary. And part of that big celebration, if they've been so stubbornly refusing to re-release any old Pokemon game, might be a collection, or at least a series of console collections, like the Game Boy Pokemon Collection and the DS Pokemon Collection, so on and so forth. But honestly, if they just sold one Switch cartridge that had playable versions of every Pokemon game up until Generation 7, they could probably sell that for $200 and people would eat it up. It's me, I'm people. But if collections are unreasonable, let's give out some more reasonable takes. The most realistic option is just going to be digital re-releases of Virtual Console ports. But if we want to be a little hopeful without being too optimistic, I wouldn't doubt if there's generation cartridges that could come out, like a cartridge that's just red, blue, yellow, or a cartridge that's just gold, silver, crystal. I mean, if we want to get really hopeful, it might be GBA and beyond. So a fire red leaf green cartridge and a heart gold soul silver cartridge. I would appreciate it, although that might be asking too much. Admittedly, there is one big issue here, and that's the DS games being ported to a single screen. But luckily, 9 times out of 10, anything on the DS bottom menu could just be a menu that you can pull up. It's not like we haven't had single screen Pokemon games before. Not to mention, look at all the Wii U games that have been brought over to the Switch. They obviously know how to make 2 screens work in a 1-screen format. It's almost like 2 screens has never been really necessary, especially since they have a bigger screen to work with. Any of the battle menus, where the battle menu is on the bottom and the display of the battle is on the top, can be condensed to 1 screen, similarly to how they do it now. Although I guess that would begin to constitute a remake versus just a re-release, but you get the idea. Is it too good to be true? Honestly, probably. But to be honest, their stubborn refusal to re-release any Pokemon game only has 2 possible options. Either I'm right and they're planning a big, celebratory re-release of all the games, or Game Freak just hates you. And you know what? After the recent leaks, I wouldn't blame them if it's the second option. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. In the meantime, if you want to know what my thoughts were on the most recent Mario Party entry, Super Mario Party Jamboree, last week I made a review on that, which you can find right here. Till next time, you've been watching Right Toost. Of all the YouTube channels, it's the second one. Stay toasty, slices.